I think us as officers were unique because we have a job to do, and we can go from coming out of the substation and seeing, something very traumatic, a child being injured or killed or something, and then dealing with that, and then just having to continue our shift after that.
Here's something that doesn't make headlines every day. When communities trust their local law enforcement, everyone is safer. People go and report crimes, and the witnesses of those crimes come forward. Families call for help before situations get worse. That trust doesn't happen overnight or by accident. It takes years to build, and it can disappear the moment priorities change. The guest today spent 15 years making this type of relationship his focus. In South San Diego, San Ysidro, Otay Mesa, Nestor, the Tijuana River Valley, these communities. He coordinated food distributions that served families, organized the first gun buyback program, and he showed up to community meetings, to school events, to neighborhood gatherings, people's homes, until families knew his name. That's what public safety is about. Officer Carlos Lacarra retired after 31 years with the San Diego Police Department, nearly 23 of those years in the Southern Division of South San Diego. When I represented these communities on the San Diego City Council, I saw what happens when law enforcement and residents work together. I also saw what happens when that relationship isn't the priority. What I want to understand, what I think we all need to understand, is that how community policing can actually work. What does it take to build trust in a community where that trust has been tested? And what do we lose when the relationships that need to happen stop being the focus? I'm David Alvarez, and this is Dreaming Big, Working Hard, where we talk about the people who build stronger communities across San Diego and beyond. Officer Lacarra, thank you so much for being here. I still have to call you that even though you're now retired. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I want to ask you to share a little bit about your story. I always love to hear how people's walk of life, how you got to where you ended up doing in terms of your service, your public service as an officer with the San Diego Police Department for your entire career. But where'd you come from? What's your family story, your origins?
So basically my origins are, both my parents are Mexican. They came from Mexico. My father was actually at one point was a traffic officer in Tijuana.
Oh, okay.
So he did that for about 18 years. Then they got married in 1966, migrated into San Diego. My father became a truck driver here for the Union 36, I think it was, and did that for, I think, almost 25 years.
Wow.
Until he retired. My mom was a homemaker. And they moved, first lived in San Diego on Marlborough Street, then moved to El Cajon, where they purchased a home. And that's where I was raised, was in El Cajon. After El Cajon, went to school there. I went to Grossmont College and obtained my associate's degree in administration of justice.
Okay.
Then shortly after, I transferred to San Diego State, where I got my criminal justice degree. In 1994, I applied for the San Diego Police Department and got hired on eventually. And,
And you were there for 31 years.
31 years, yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Are you the only one in your family, or are you the youngest, middle, oldest?
I am the oldest. I have a sister. She is 1 year younger than I am. Okay. She's actually a teacher.
Oh, okay. In San Diego?
In San Diego, Poway.
Awesome.
Unified School District.
You both stayed local.
Yes.
That's
yes,
awesome.
we did.
And your family, once you started your own family, you're from South San Diego area.
Yes, my family. When I got married, we actually purchased a condo in Escondido. Lived there for a couple of years. Then we had our oldest, Brianna, in Escondido, and then we moved to the South Bay, where I've been living ever since.
Yeah, when I was on the city council, and that's how we met each other, you started relatively at the same time I did in your role that I started in my role as a council member, you as community relations officer. I started to learn about how many officers actually have to drive far away, like North County. You mentioned Escondido, because that's where it was more affordable to live. And that's one of the things that I always was concerned about like, our community officers, our teachers, the men and women who serve our community should be able to live in the community. And so I was always worried about that distance, because I feel like people who live in their community, it's just much more personal, right? And so you actually live in the community where you served, certainly in the last 15 years up until your retirement as a community relations officer. Tell us a little bit about what a community relations officer is. You're a sworn San Diego Police Department officer, and you probably had a lot of different jobs, and share what those are, and then ended up deciding you wanted to do community relations.
Yeah, so basically, when I got hired on, initially I did do patrol. I did my time at actually Eastern Division.
Mm-hmm.
From Eastern Division, Mid-City Division was built, and we transferred over there, and there was a split between both divisions. I was there for approximately 6 years, almost 7. Then I actually went to the narcotics unit, where for 2 years I was the drug court liaison officer. There for the drug court participants.
Mm-hmm.
From there, I transferred to Southern Division, and while at Southern Division, I've done several things. I was on the border, the walking team. I was actually at the juvenile services team. I did a little bit of detective work, some acting sergeant work. And eventually the opportunity came to be a community relations officer, which I always enjoyed interacting with the community and, trying to problem solve and, just help out in general. And, so then I decided to become a community relations officer.
So I think people in public service, police department, others obviously care about the community. That's why they do it. I think that's what their character is. A community relations officer is that like a little bit on steroids, because you're very much in the community. What types of activities would you typically do as a community relations officer?
Well, as a community relations officer, we would attend a lot of the community meetings to really be a resource for the community, try be available and to the public, because normally, unfortunately, the public normally sees law enforcement in either, pretty negative aspects. Maybe they're victimized, or even potentially they're the subject of some kind of investigation or something. So this gives us the opportunity just to interact in a more comfortable setting with the community and be available to them for questions, any concerns they have. A lot of times they don't want to take the time to call, and if there's an officer there, it just makes it much more easier for them to speak to law enforcement.
What I witnessed as I went to community meetings like you did as a council member, whether it was planning groups or rec councils at parks or any number of business associations, right? All those, it's really like a breaking down of a wall. And I think for a lot of people, you talked about why maybe they don't outreach. One, some people just don't know that they can outreach when it's not an emergency or not for something that requires police presence. But a lot of quality of life issues, right? Things that may be happening in the community that we may need a presence, or at least an interaction with our local police departments. And that's where I saw that you, again, making yourself very available on questions that people may have, or again, they had concerns, they could very easily go to you. So it's very unique in that way. It's almost like it's a liaison. And it feels very natural. At least it did with you. I think you were just so connected in so many ways that it just felt like, we could just ask Officer Lacarra. He'll help us figure that out. But that probably took a while for you to reach the level of comfort, or what? Like, is it always been in your nature to sort of be a people person?
We try to, as law enforcement, we try and be a people person. Being a community relations officer gives me a more focused opportunity to be able to communicate with the community, where, if I'm on patrol, I'm kind of called to call, and sometimes you have the ability to spend a little bit more time, but a lot of times it's just the calls for service are just such that it doesn't.
Especially when you've had shortages in police department hirings, which this is a plug. I think the police department is still hiring, so if you're inclined to serve the public in that way, welcome you to seek that opportunity. So yeah, you're right. Like, you're from call to call because people expect you to respond to their calls, to their actual emergency calls. This one really lets you spend that quality of time in creating those relationships.
Yeah, and there obviously was a transition period because it was a new position for me and having to get to know people and everything. But once I got into that position, I realized this is not, the police department is part of the community, and really any kind of law enforcement function, any kind of thing that happens in the community, it really needs to be a shared partnership. Okay. Because, as police officers, we don't have the time and resources a lot of time because, like you just mentioned, we're short-handed. But the community looks for us to handle their problems. We wear a lot of hats. We try and help out people as much as we can. But realistically, it's difficult. That's why, for me, I always felt it was important to bring, part of the solution was actually bringing the community and having them be part of the solution too, having them do a little part. As simple as maybe, like if they're complaining about cars that are parked on the street, we have an avenue for that. And it's really not a police function, but as a community relations officer, I want to be responsive to that community member. But what I do ask of them is, do me a favor. We have the Get It Done app. Please put a complaint there. Let it kind of go through its, course, because that's the correct way to do it. And if for some reason it doesn't get handled the way you think, then definitely reach out to me and we'll look at it and we'll reevaluate and see if I can help you out.
Well, I would say that that's like empowering the community themselves, right? Because giving them a tool on something that they care about, in this case, and man, parking violations all the time. As a council member, I would hear it. I live it living on a very busy street where cars are left, for multiple days or weeks. But it's a way to empower people like, hey, you can do something about it. And like you said, if for some reason it's not working, then reach out to you. So from things like parking violations, where you help people with that, but you were also involved with a lot of like different kinds of initiatives. You want to share some of those maybe other initiatives that you felt really help the community feel that they're partners in this relationship to keep the community safe?
Yeah, well, we participated in a lot of events. We had basically a food bank at the substation. It had never been done. I coordinated us with your assistance too, because I know you were involved, and I appreciate that. We were able to provide food to 600 families there at the substation. And that's one of the initiatives. Open houses there at the substation. The National Night Out.
Yeah, those were great.
Yeah, that's always
like thousands of people at those events.
Thousands of people. We believe it's the largest one in San Diego County.
Yeah.
Who knows? Maybe California.
Yeah, that's right.
But it is a large one, and that's when we work really closely with community to make that event happen and be as successful as it is.
Let's talk a little bit about that, because it happens once a year, and usually it's like August, I believe, is usually the date.
Yes.
And that's like the marquee, if you will, event of community relations. And at least at the one at your division that you worked at, like I said, thousands of people, a lot of young people, which is great because, you got to make sure you start to create those relationships with people early on in life, and a lot of community resources. It wasn't just about National Night Out, the police is out there, come meet us and talk to us, but like other resources of the community. Like you just identified, food insecurity is one that we hear a lot about actually in our community, but like health services, I think we had like mobile clinics at some of them, all those things. You don't think of like, that's not the police department's duty, but I think you see this as more than just what your job description is.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, we're community. We're all here to help each other out. We all have a part in our community, from the citizens of our community to the law enforcement, to the different organizations that provide the services, businesses. And so this is an opportunity to let the community know what is available out there. And more than anything, it's really just to show that, law enforcement is there to assist and be a friend, okay, and available for the community.
Yeah. You say that, and it just reminds me a little bit about what I've often heard. In the last several years, there's been some strong feelings, sentiments, tensions, you could even say, among law enforcement community often that we've seen. I come from the community of Barrio Logan Heights, lived through some of the really highest points of gang activity, violence, everything you can think of. And oftentimes people would ask, like, well, like, were you over policed is a term that gets used. And I actually respond to that in that, no, like, we all want to feel safe. And so we've got to make sure that our police department responds to the needs of the community. And so when I had community meetings, walk door to door, talking to people, they want the police to respond so that they can feel safe, especially in communities like that. And so I bring this up because your role as a community relations officer, especially given the recent years, sort of some of that tension, what was it like serving in that role during that time in your particular case? I'm just curious if, because of how long you did it, the relationships you established, whether that was different sentiment, if you felt that differently. What was it like?
Well, you know what? Southern Division is very unique because we've always had a lot of support from the community. When those kind of situations come up, they talk about over policing and stuff. The majority of people that I talked to were glad to have us in the community. You know, and I can understand the other side believing, thinking or feeling that they're over policed, but honestly, the San Diego Police Department, I'm sure every department around is doing it just really based like from a business standpoint. It's like the calls of service are coming from a certain area. We have to staff it a certain way because we need to make those needs to make sure that the community is safe. So I can understand where some communities might feel over policed, but at the same time, I mean, I'm sure we can show them why we have so many police in a certain area.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some divisions, Northwestern Division, that has very few officers, very few calls for service.
Right.
Other divisions within our city, yes, we have a lot of officers because there's a lot of calls for service.
Yeah. What would you say to a young person who may be interested in pursuing a career in law enforcement? That need exists still. I'm really big into making sure people have pathways into careers, and sometimes our community, to be very honest, doesn't think of law enforcement as a pathway for them. And what would you say to someone who may feel that way?
Well, I mean, I think, law enforcement there's a lot of opportunities within just our law enforcement community for promotions, to move up and maybe even into different careers. I really think what's important is if you're young and want to come into law enforcement, is that you really, need to do your homework. It really takes a special kind of person to come into law enforcement. And you really should do your homework and just make sure that that's a career you want because lives are at stake. Your life, your partner's life, the community's life. And there's things that we see, decisions that we make that we can't hesitate. And, like myself, I prepared myself for this job. And now I'm retired, so I don't have to worry about that so much. But even throughout my career, I know I would be faced with certain situations and I would be going through things in my head like, hey, what if this happens? And those are the type of things. You shouldn't just see it as kind of another job, a stepping stone to something else, because it really does take a lot of training, a lot of professionalism. And you really can make a difference if really your heart is into the job, which I hope the newer officers, that's really for the reason that they're doing it, like it was for me and other officers around the time that I got hired on.
I hear you say about the decisions that you have to make and what goes through your mind thinking about it, and obviously split-second decisions, part of the everyday job. One thing I've never asked anybody, and hope you're comfortable in this, is you also see a lot of things that could be traumatic. We now more openly talk about mental health as a community, just generally, and a society, like it's real. There's a lot of things that happen, and I'm sure you experience. What if someone is thinking about this and they're like, oh, that sounds like a really difficult, like what are some of the avenues, support systems, or even coping mechanisms perhaps that you relied on to do that job?
Well, nowadays there are a lot more coping mechanisms. Back when I started and throughout most of my career, there really wasn't a lot for us. We've always had psychiatrists available to us to focus. And it just depends on the officer if he wants to take that up and stuff. But But yeah, throughout my career, just like all officers, we see a lot of things. It kind of sends chills through my body, just kind of reminiscing, thinking about what the things that I've seen. And, I think us as officers, we're unique because we have a job to do. And we can go from coming out of the substation and seeing, something very traumatic, a child being injured or killed or something, and then dealing with that and then just having to continue our shift. After that, we're done with that situation. Now we continue.
You're going to get another call to do something else.
And so we're there, we kind of put it in the back of our minds, continue trying to do our job as professionally as possible. And most officers, they probably just go, okay, next day. But we internally, I'm sure it has an effect. We do have wellness now through our department. There's a lot more avenues. There's a computer system I know through the San Diego Police Department that tracks basically your activity, how many use of forces you've had, different things. It takes measurements, and then it raises little flags to kind of have your supervisor check on the officer just to make sure everything's okay. Because, like I've always told people is that, we're human beings. We're picked from the human race. We do make mistakes. We try to do the best we can. We try to be out there for the community. We all have families, and we can err just like anybody else. But
you mentioned use of technology. That's really interesting with to track and to monitor and to give potential, again, some flags of hey, check in. Use of technology generally with law enforcement obviously probably has changed over the course of your career. Where do you see that use of technology, and where does that stand with or compare to the role of an actual person, human being, to perform the job of law enforcement?
So, as law enforcement, we're just basically told what we can do and what we can't do. Okay. After 31 years, I've seen, our technology has definitely improved and our being able to combat or prevent crime or put people in jail, solve a lot of crimes. It seems like we get a lot of pushback on the technology, which I understand, the concerns of privacy issues and everything, okay, cameras and plate readers and stuff. But really, we do a very good job in protecting people's rights, but we need that technology for us to be able to solve those crimes. There was, I'm sure you remember the Church's Chicken homicide, how that was solved because a camera picked up the license plate of the vehicle and it was solved. Okay. Likely prevented, maybe another crime, but definitely put somebody dangerous in jail. Those are the kind of things that we need to make our job easier to be able to keep the community safe. And, prevention or just, after the fact, being able to put somebody in custody and definitely prevent possible future crimes.
So it can aid in the work that you do, but will ever, people talk about the future and replacing people, humans, with technology. Does this work, can it be replaced, especially what you do, which is relationship building?
No, you really can't. You have to have those people, officers out on the street and addressing people. It's I always kind of, I guess I can compare it to like the cars, the auto cars that drive around by themselves. There's some faults in there. It can't do everything. So technology can do so much, but you definitely need that interaction. Just the feeling officers, can bring or take from the situation and then be able to address it and appropriaply address it.
Going back to the community relations officer role that you played, is there anything that, or any couple of things that you want to share that really you remember that will always stay with you in terms of what experiences you had in that role that just like, you'll remember, fondly and as part of your career?
Well, you know what? Just being able to, there's been a couple of situations where, parents reach out to me and say, you know what, I can't do much with my son. They're kind of out of control. What can I do? And I took it upon myself to be able to meet with them, meet with the child, hoping I made a difference. And I think I did. There was a lot of events throughout my career. Like I'm sure you remember one when I was Santa Claus.
Yes, I was going to ask you about that.
Casa Familiar.
Yeah.
And that was a great event. And I tell you, one of the most touching things was that there was a family that came through, and there was this little boy that came. The family came, got their gifts, and then walked away. And then the little boy, after the family had kind of walked away, came back to me, and he just asked me. He was probably about maybe 9 or 10 years old, and just said, "Santa, can you please do me a favor and keep my family safe?" Just a little boy at that age. That was really touching to me, because I know I'm making a difference, even though that was not a police role.
Yeah.
I was Santa Claus. But at the same time, these outreaches and being involved in the community really does make a difference.
Yeah. And, we're really proud of our South San Diego community. Like you said, even your department is very different, very unique. But like as a community, we're very tight knit. So whether it was community leaders at community groups, business leaders, I feel like everybody really wants to pitch in and like support, and it's like we're all in it together, right?
Exactly.
And you were a part of that.
Yeah, and plus I was part of the community too in my private life.
Yeah.
And as a police officer, I mean it was just great working with community members throughout all these years, and being able to problem solve some of the things that we have. Some things we were able to make a big change. Some things, unfortunately, for reasons out of our control, we couldn't do a lot. One you'll probably remember is like the wildcatting situation.
Yeah,
that's been going on for years, and we try the best we can, and we try and find different solutions, try and problem solve, make a little dent. But
so, for those who don't know, Southern Division is at the border region,
yes,
and the rest of San Diego in the south. But we have a lot of people who cross the border and who want to take transportation services, and some illegal transportation services that could be unsafe because they have no permits or they're unlicensed. And so trying to keep that like black market, if you will, out has been a challenge for a long time.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's kind of frustrating from the law enforcement standpoint because we know what needs to be done.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of finances, because of staffing, there's always something that doesn't allow us to be able to go in 100%, because our number one priority is patrol.
Yeah.
And those emergency situations that
people have the expectation that if they call, that you respond. So you can't be doing these other operations all the time.
Exactly. But ideally, we were talking about over policing earlier, but we definitely need more police on the streets to be able to address more of those, even the quality of life issues too. Yeah. A lot of things have been taken away from us, like the soliciting. And I get it, for the reasoning and stuff, but at the same time, that took away a tool from us to be able to address.
That's changed a little bit this year. We had a law last year that allows a little bit more work to be done. And I just had a roundtable last December, and it might need to change more. We'll see. But we're giving more tools. We had a get together with the chief of police and others. And so on this law that was approved a couple years ago, that took away the ability to approach individuals who may be
law enforcement. It took that function away from
law
us.
Enforcement. Correct.
Where
if someone may be a victim who's being sexually trafficked, there was limitation to the work you could do to.
Yeah,
enforce.
But even just the regular soliciting on the streets and stuff, where it gave us a tool. Even though as law enforcement, we don't want to come down and arrest people, and sometimes all we want is, hey, we're here for a complaint. We would like you to cooperate. It's illegal for you to be soliciting on the street.
Yeah.
Can you please move on?
Yeah.
And simple as that. If they don't, then for us as law enforcement, we want to have a tool to be able to take it to the next level, because we're addressing what the community wants, and those kind of tools are.
Well, I can tell you the community wants that I represent, obviously, the Dalbergia area in Central Division, which is like in Barrio Logan. National City, it's happening, and it's on the streets, and like kids are walking to school and businesses are seeing all this traffic. So hopefully this year we'll see where the law that's changed goes. But I think the point of that being is that you've got to be responsive to what the community wants, and that's the role certainly that you played. What does the future of community policing look like, in your opinion?
Well, I believe, especially with the chief that we have, Chief Wallen right now, is that really the emphasis is going to be on community relations and more preventive. I know it's going that route with juvenile services. And community relations, I think, was the same thing. So we're looking, if staffing allows, I think a little bit more robust, a little bit more outreach, because really community relations is it's not just a community relations officer's job. It's really a department's job. Okay. But again, I go back to, sometimes we don't have the time to be able to take that extra time to spend and make those relations. We used to have beats that we worked. Each officer worked a beat, and basically that was their beat.
You got to know it really well.
You got to know it really well. And nowadays, because of staffing, we're jumping around. Sometimes we're understaffed. I'm still talking like I'm still working. I'm actually retired, but they're understaffed, and so that makes a difference. But it really is, I think, from the point of even hiring officers, because I really do think it makes a difference, because this job changes you to a certain extent. And I think if you have somebody that has a personality that's, I don't want to say aggressive, but a little bit more
confrontational
maybe, the job will change you, and it'll just make you maybe a little bit more harder. Okay. And then there's other officers that come in very low key, and it changes them a little bit for positive, because obviously you have to for the job. But I think community relations should definitely be, and they teach us, and 31 years ago they were teaching community relations and everything, and how we should interact with the community. But I really think there should be more of an emphasis on
It's great to hear that, at least in the case of San Diego Police Department. I assume other police departments are doing some level of this work, that emphasis that you talked about. So that I'm looking forward to that. And I think also key from what you just said is maybe some people have an image of who can become a police officer. And what you just said is, service-minded individual who wants to do good for the community. If that's how you feel, this is a potential career path for you.
Yeah. And some of the things that law enforcement really struggles with right now is really a lot of stuff that's put out on the media, social media, a lot of the political aspects and the light that we're shed. And like I said, I think I said it earlier, is we're not perfect. We make mistakes, but honestly, I think the great majority of law enforcement really wants to do the right thing and be a partner with the community. But sometimes we're shed in a very negative light, and it really affects all of us, especially since now with social media and everything gets out there. AI is horrible, I think. Artificial intelligence, it puts a lot of things that people
It's distorting a lot of realities.
It really is. Yeah. And it's unfortunate. But those kind of that puts us in a bad light, and how can you defend against that? Really, it makes it much more difficult for us. It makes our job much more difficult.
I think that exemplifies why there's no better time than now for community relations officers, for this type of approach to policing matters more, because you want to have access directly to the source as opposed to what may be put out there that may not be real. And a call out to folks who want to serve in this type of role with the community. I just want to say thank you on behalf of the community. I know you had your retirement celebration and everybody was there. You were really tremendously respected by everyone. We all celebrated you, and certainly I think we'll miss you. I just want to thank you for the partnership over the years, for focusing on community first, for identifying, okay, this seems to be a problem. What can we do to be a part of the solution? That's really what this should be about. And I want to thank you for the approach that you've taken.
Well, I appreciate your partnership and your staff's partnership too in it, because, we did solve a lot of issues in the community. We worked together, and, I think it really showed out there. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Benny.
Thank you.
Carlos, thank you so much. This has been a conversation about policing, but really it's been about what works in our community and what happens when that stops being the focus. I have some takeaways from today's conversation. Certainly, first of all, that community policing works. It's not just about a slogan, it's an actual strategy in public safety. When officers build these relationships with the communities over the course of time, people cooperate with law enforcement, the crimes are reported, we get response to our community, witnesses come forward. Again, public safety is what wins. And Carlos proved that over 15 years in his role. Also, trust is fragile and it takes years to build and it can be destroyed overnight, whether it's by a national incident, a change in policy, or simply by shifting our focus to something else. When communities or departments prioritize other approaches, that trust can end. And that's not something we want to see. That's not how we stay safe. This is a choice, but not a simple one. It takes political leadership, department priorities, community expectations from all of us, resources, obviously. It all plays a role. We all play a role in what kind of policing our community gets. As recent events have demonstrated, the evidence is clear. When relationship building is the focus, our communities are safer. And Carlos proved that. He proved it for so long. Community policing isn't just a nice idea. It's really something that is a better approach, and it's achievable. It happens and it can be done. The question is whether we make that a priority. If you want to learn more about community policing in San Diego, please visit sandiego.gov/police and look up your community relations officer or in other parts of San Diego as well. And reach out. Don't be afraid to do so. In fact, embrace it. If you believe in relationship building, this type of relationship building is important and should be the focus in your community, then make your voice heard. I'm David Alvarez. This is Dreaming Big, Working Hard, and we'll see you next time.